St. Catherine of Siena, whose original name was Caterina di Giacomo di Benincasa, was born on March 25, 1347, in Siena, Italy. This was shortly before the bubonic plague, also known as the Black Death, ravaged Europe. She was the 24th child out of 25 of Giacomo and Lapa Benincasa. She was a twin, but her sister did not survive infancy. Take note that this was a time when antibiotics, vaccines, and other medical breakthroughs had not been discovered, so half of her siblings did not make it to adulthood. The early years, 1347 to 1358. Catherine's father had a thriving business as a wool dyer. Even though half of her brothers and sisters did not survive, she still had a lot of siblings. They had a big house which was always full of extended family members who would come to visit and stay for a long while. As a child, Catherine was so bright and merry that the family gave her the pet name Europhisne, which is Greek for joy. According to her confessor, friend, and biographer, Blessed Raymond of Capua, a Dominican priest, Catherine had her first vision of Christ when she was only 6 years old. She was walking with her brother Stefano on the way home from visiting a married sister, when she saw atop the San Domenico church Jesus seated on his throne with Peter, Paul, and John standing near. Catherine saw that Jesus smiled at her and blessed her. After the vision, all Catherine wanted was to pray and be close to Jesus. At the age of 7, she vowed not to marry, but to commit herself only to Jesus. The flame of love had been kindled. Young adult years, 1359 to 1364. When she was 12 years old, her family, especially her mother, decided to prepare her for marriage. Catherine's mom didn't know anything about the vows she took when she was 7. So she started to make Catherine wear bright colored dresses and jewelry. An older sister changed the way she looked to make her more appealing to men. Catherine went along with the changes in her appearance because she loved her mother, but she would dodge the subject of marriage every time it came up. Her mom continued to fuss over her. When it was clear to Catherine that her mom wasn't going to stop, she did something that was a no-no during that time. She cut her hair, which was considered by all to be her most beautiful asset. She was 15 years old. Both her parents were furious. They punished Catherine. She did the chores for the entire household just like a slave and was not even given a room of her own to sleep. Catherine didn't mind the chores except that she didn't have time to pray. So Catherine created an inner cell or room in her heart where she could always talk to God even when she was so busy doing her household tasks. In that inner cell of her heart, she remained undisturbed. It was during this time when she was serving her family that she had a dream about St. Dominic, presenting her with the habit of his order, the order of preachers, the Dominicans. In her dream, he told her that she would soon wear it. During the 14th century, Third Order Dominicans wear the Dominican habit and were called the Mantellate. Although they didn't take a vow of poverty, chastity, and obedience, they followed a certain rule of life, like the nuns and priests, but they stayed at home. The Mantellate during Catherine's time consisted mostly of widows and old married women, so they were not in favor of a very young Catherine joining them. Later years as a teen, 1365 to 1366. Giacomo, Catherine's father, realized that there was no way they could persuade her to get married, so he allowed her to do as she pleased. She was given a tiny room where all she did was pray and do acts of penance. In this little room, Jesus visited Catherine several times, sometimes with our Blessed Mother and other saints. It was also in this room that she started to form the basis of her teachings. She left only to go to church for daily Mass and confession. Catherine begged her mother to appeal to the Montellate to accept her, and she did several times. But the women of the order said no because of her age, and they thought she might attract men because of her beauty. She was finally accepted after 4 members of the order spoke to her and were impressed by her sincerity and wisdom. She received the habit and became a Montellate and the youngest member of the order. However, it was not always blissful inside the tiny room where Catherine stayed. The evil spirits besieged her. They tempted her to stop the penances she was doing, get married and have children, and lead a normal life. She battled them, and the demons fled eventually. Catherine was not schooled, and so she didn't know how to read. She wanted to pray the divine office, so she tried to learn to read by herself, but she failed. So she prayed to God to teach her. By the time she finished praying, she could already read quite well. On Shrove Tuesday in 1366, while the whole town was celebrating with a carnival and a feast, Catherine was in her cell praying, and she experienced a mystical marriage with Jesus. Our Blessed Mother appeared, took her hand, and placed it in Jesus' infant hands. The divine child gave Catherine a ring with 4 pearls, symbolizing purity of mind, heart, word, and works. And he said, "I will espouse you to me in faith." In her 20s, 1367 to 1375, after 3 years of staying in her tiny cell, Jesus told her it was time for her to leave her withdrawn life and enter the public life. She started by going upstairs to eat dinner with her family, which she had not done in years. Catherine first served her family. She took care of her father until he died, and buried 6 nieces and nephews who died of the plague. Then she went out to preach and to do works of mercy. She nursed the sick and helped the poor with food and money. She counseled many. Because of her burning love for God, she prayed, "Take my heart, Lord, and give me yours." And Jesus heard her prayer and actually did it. In 1370, when Catherine was 23 years old, he came to her, took out her heart, and gave her his burning, fiery heart. Her works of mercy attracted a lot of people who gathered around Catherine. She saw them as her spiritual family. Many people joined her family, and so 2 priests were assigned to be with her to hear confessions of those she had converted. There were miracles and exorcisms attributed to her intercessions. When her spiritual director, Blessed Raymond of Capua, and Matteo Ceni, one of her followers, got sick of the plague and were both near death, Catherine's intercession healed them. With her growing popularity and influence, Catherine also made enemies who accused her of being a fake. When she told Jesus about it, he held out 2 crowns for her to choose, one with jewels and the other with thorns. She chose the crown of thorns. When she was about 25 years old, she significantly reduced her food intake because she threw up when she ate. So she lost a lot of weight and became weak, but spiritually became stronger and stronger. She received Holy Communion daily. In a letter to her spiritual director, she said, "This is how we learn to enjoy eating souls. Souls are a food so sweet and mild that they make us fat, till we can enjoy no other food." Her reputation as a holy woman and her immense popularity led her to be involved in politics and with the Pope. Along with a group of followers, Catherine traveled all throughout northern and central Italy, mainly advocating for the reform of the clergy. In 1375, she went to Pisa by invitation to persuade the city and Lucca not to join the anti-pope alliance, which was gaining momentum at that time. She was successful. It was also at Pisa that she received the stigmata, visible only to her at her request. Catherine didn't just travel to push for church reforms. She started writing letters by dictating to scribes, to people in positions of power, pleading for peace between the Italian republics and principalities, and for the transfer of the papacy from Avignon, France, to Rome. Her last years, 1376 to 1380. She wrote letters to Pope Gregory XI and urged him to reform the clergy and the Papal State's governance. In June 1376, she went to Avignon herself to meet him in person and to make peace between him and Florence, but she was unsuccessful. But the Pope never doubted her holiness and eventually returned to Rome in January 1377. In late 1377 to early 1378, Catherine went to Florence to continue to work for peace between Rome and Florence. While she was there, Pope Gregory XI died. Pope Urban VI got elected. Catherine wrote letters to the Pope begging him to make peace with Florence. Finally, a delegation from Florence went to Rome in July 1378 and returned carrying an olive branch from the Pope. Once peace was restored, she came back home and dictated her major work, Dialogue of Divine Providence, which is a conversation between the soul and God. She also continued writing letters to her spiritual family, members, people in power, and the Pope. In November 1378, she was summoned by Pope Urban VI to Rome due to the Western Schism that was taking place. The schism was the period in Roman Catholic Church history where there were 2 popes, later on 3, all with their own following. She stayed at Pope Urban VI's court and did her best to convince nobles and cardinals of his legitimacy. In early 1380, Catherine could no longer eat nor drink water. By February, she could no longer walk. She died in Rome on April 29, 1380, at the age of 33, the same age Jesus died. Her last words were, "Father, into your hands I commend my spirit." After her death, in 1461, Catherine was canonized by Pope Pius II. Then in April 13, 1866, she was declared a co-patroness of Rome by Pope Pius IX. On June 18, 1939, she was named the joint patron saint of Italy, along with St. Francis of Assisi, by Pope Pius XII. In 1970, she was bestowed the title of Doctor of the Church by Pope Paul VI. And in 1999, she was named one of the patron saints of Europe by Pope John Paul II. On June 28, 2017, the new parish of St. Catherine of Siena in Hamiton, Ontario, was formed from the previous parishes of Corpus Christi and Our Lady of Lourdes. St. Catherine of Siena, pray for us.